Great. Look, hello everyone. It's really my pleasure and my honor to be here. And I got to say, I'm so excited for this conversation that we're going to kick off. Digital strategy is one of my favorite things to speak about. And there's so much enormous opportunity with the data that we have at our disposal to target and reach patients where they are and HCPs where they are. So we have a great conversation that's going to talk about omni-channel, programmatic, using surround sound digital strategy to reach your audiences, right? And then we're also going to talk about some data, right? How to really leverage data within those practices as well, right? So I'll kick it off with my own introduction, and I'll let this esteemed panel go ahead and introduce themselves as well. So my name is Gaetan Akinrolabu. I'm currently at Mirati Therapeutics, a targeted oncology company where I oversee digital strategy for corporate affairs and partner very, very closely with omnichannel to supply that corporate unbranded halo for all those efforts. Prior to Mirati Therapeutics, I was at Bristol Myers Squibb for 5 or 6 years. I see some of my previous colleagues in the building, where I did, again, oversee digital strategy, paid media strategy, omni-channel strategy within corporate affairs, partnering, again, very closely across the organization, across the enterprise, including commercial marketing. So with that said, I'll go ahead and pass it on to the panel, who will then introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Hancock, and I work for Merck Pharmaceuticals. I've been with Merck over 30 years. And I lead a team of channel strategy and engagement, which are digital specialists in U.S. oncology for all of the Merck Oncology division in the U.S. market.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nataliya Andreychuk. I'm CEO of Viseven company and one of the founders. Like almost 15 years, we are working in marketing, MarTech exactly. We have created a platform which is accelerating the content production for different channels and helps our customers to become purely omni-channel and feed with the content, with relevant content, all the channels which are popular today. Also, we are known as a digital content factory, so where we have the extended services and professional services to our customers. So very nice meeting you all here.
Hi everyone, I am Stephanie Douglas. I am the Director of Media within our Sanofi's General Medicines business unit. So I oversee all of our media strategy and execution for our diabetes, transplant, cardiovascular, and established products division. I've been with Sanofi for almost 6 years now, and prior to Sanofi, I was on the media agency side for over 15 years.
Good afternoon, I'm Karin Hayes. I am with Medix Health, and I've been there all of 7 months, although I'm not a newcomer to the industry. Here I lead our analytics and products groups, and previously I was with Symphony and Bristol Myers Squibb for many years, leading an AI and ML practice, as well as developing some of our original longitudinal patient databases. So excited to be here, thank you.
Perfect, round of applause for the panelists. All right, we certainly have some great expertise in the building. So let's start with the questions, right? As we know, the digital landscape is constantly evolving, right? But also our customers is also evolving on a regular basis. Their actions, their affinity groups are constantly changing, right? So it's very important for us to get a clear understanding of where the fish are so we could fish where the fish are, using channel strategy, data, and analytics. I want to ask the panel, speaking about evolution, and as we see how digital and omni-channel has evolved, can you talk a little bit about, even looking at this year versus last year, some of the changes to the digital landscape that you've seen in your everyday operations? And I think what we'll do here is we'll start with Stephanie.
So I think that we've the partners, the third-party partners that exist, their data and their technical capabilities from a targeting perspective and a measurement perspective have evolved a lot. And even throughout this conference, we've been seeing a lot of new announcements of things that we can begin leveraging for even now and into next year. The ability to segment and serve our ads more dynamically to our different customers, patients or physicians, and also get that data read back on the performance and how they're engaging with our assets, I think has changed substantially in the last year. And I also think just the nature of some of the more biddable channels for pharma specifically, when you talk about social or you talk about programmatic, audio, the different ways that we can execute across the different channels that our key customers are engaging with to be able to follow them at that right time and serve them that right message.
Great. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I think it is very important to say, like a year ago, even before, everyone was hunting for software products. What has to be in the IT environment to be built? Like, what is digital asset management role? What are the other roles, like of the other tools? Today, like happily to announce, we already know what we need. Now we are fighting for transparency, for better use of our budgets, for better use of our time, and for better understanding, better segmentation of patients and other customers we have. So like this is what changed, in my humble opinion, like in the last 2 years. We all know what we need.
Yeah, I agree with all the panelists. I think one of the biggest shifts that we've seen in the last couple of years is, especially coming out of the COVID period, is our customers' habits have stayed a lot in the digital channels, and in some cases they're more omni-channel than we have before. So we have our reps coming back in from a digital perspective and using more tools, but we are also seeing their behaviors kind of shift as well as kind of steady state. And you can see from the data, and I do all HCP marketing, so we have that ability to use MPI level data. So understand where they're going, and COVID has really shifted them to more consumerism channels in their professional life. And so we're kind of catching up, I think, from an industry on how to connect with them and then bring that data in from so that we can use it in more of a connected fashion.
So I wanted to add a couple interesting observations. Of course, everyone's heard in the news how many of the streaming companies have not been profitable, and so they're consolidating. And so there's this big trend right now to move to paid for TV, right? Mm-hmm. And so we know that 93% of the audience, and this is for pharma to think about, 93% of the audience is reachable by streaming, of that linear audience is reachable by streaming. And about 70%, over 70% of that audience is reachable by paid streaming. So I think there's going to be more and more people, especially with the economy, that are going to be going to paid channels so they can have more access to information. So that's number one. Second, I think there's some innovative channels that maybe pharmaceuticals have not explored yet that are also very fascinating. So you guys mentioned audio with podcasts is great, but has anyone ever thought about like your digital assistant, your Google or your Alexa, and advertisements that are showing up there? It's like reaching people in these different places when they're at home. And then the final part of it is video games. I think the video game market is aging. We always used to think of it as kids. It's like my own child now who loves gaming is 29 years old. So that audience is beginning to age and need pharmaceutical products. So I think those are maybe some areas that people may want to think about for the future.
Great, great. All great stuff. I mean, I think some of the themes that I've heard throughout the panelists are leveraging the use of data, right? How important is that? And I think the evolution that we've seen from last year, especially in the peak of COVID, is that we really depended on market research tools as well as consumer research tools to get a clear understanding of what our customer was talking about so that we could then go back to our drawing board and figure out how has COVID affected the landscape and the way that we communicate, and how can we, how could we resurrect or create new channels of opportunity to speak to these audiences, to deliver the content that they're looking for, right? So with that said, let's talk about channels, right, for a second. As we all know, every channel shouldn't be utilized for everyone, right? Our data tells us that if you look at HCP audience and if you look at the disease population that you specialize in, there's a certain scale of that HCP audience, and there's a certain scale of that patient audience, right? So when we think about programmatic within your overall channel mix, right? So when I say channel, we're talking about social, we're talking about search, we're talking about different channels from programmatic and beyond. But when you think about programmatic, where does that fit within your overall advertising strategy? And whoever wants to jump on that first.
I'll jump on it. I think it's a huge part of your, it should be a huge part of your strategy, right?
And can you, real quick, can you define programmatic advertising for me for one second? I think it's good that I want to ground us on what programmatic is.
Yeah, so I would define it as, you're going beyond the just typical age demo type of targeting. You are layering on additional audiences to be able to hone in on and making sure you're serving that ad to that appropriate patient type or whatever disease state you're trying to go after, versus just, a man 25 to 54.
Very good.
But repeat your question again, sorry. You threw me off on that one.
Did I? All right. That's the whole point. No. Really, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, as you are mapping out your strategy for the year and you're mapping out the channels, you get a clear understanding of the messaging and what messaging works or what messaging doesn't work. How do you leverage programmatic out of all those channels within your advertising strategy for the year? Okay.
So I think it is an important piece or a large piece of the overall pie of what you're doing. I think it's a matter of ensuring that you, whether you're a brand person, a media person, whatever hat you wear in your organization, that everyone's aligned to this is the audience we're going after. And that first and foremost is set up. And then you understand what are the different targeting strategies that you're leveraging or third-party partners that you're leveraging, not necessarily putting all eggs in one basket as well, right? You want to test and learn through different approaches. But I think having that ability, especially because so many of our products are for a very specific audience type, at least on the consumer front. So you want to make sure you're limiting the waste of where you're spending each impression and ensuring that it's as effective and efficient as possible.
I'll add to what my colleague said, and then this is from a physician or healthcare provider perspective. And I think of programmatic and the evolution of programmatic. I mean, we really started off, it was manual bidding, right? And then it came into the automation of making that automated with algorithms. And so when you have those algorithms layer in from a physician perspective or HCP perspective, then we all kind of gravitated, or hopefully we all have gravitated, to MPI, physician-level targeting, where you have that one-to-one relationship and your element in personalization. So it, to me, is the foundation of everything you're doing from an omni-channel perspective. We have started in, I think, banners and display, but we've quickly now moved with the evolution of data, insights, and capabilities to other channels, whether it's connected TV, whether it's video programmatic, audio streaming. I think the other things are digital out of home. That's another piece. And then you can think about contextual search. And beyond our, I would say, closed loop structures of social and going to more like the Facebooks and the LinkedIns and the Twitters of the world. And so when you think about programmatic, it's like the foundation of what you do to build on omni-channel, because you're trying to find that one-to-one connection, right channel, right time, right content, right message, to then connect them through the story that you're weaving throughout their digital world or that digital experience or campaign, whatever you want to call it, and move them to the next phase of your story, but also driving adoption from a healthcare provider perspective. So you kind of have to figure out programmatic in order to be, in my opinion, successful with omni-channel, next best action engines, and everything else that kind of goes and builds and layers on top of that.
I want to confirm that this is really a basics to build on omnichannel. And I want to add that the acceleration of the content production for omnichannel is also a very valuable piece of all the pictures and the strategy, because whenever we have everything in place, we have to think about how we accelerate our content production, how we accelerate it at every level, at the level of ideation, of the level of planning, on the level of MLR, on the every level, assembling and publishing. So whenever we do have some dynamic elements in our ads, which can be changed in the future or even today, particularly by AI. So like whatever we can employ from the innovation to make sure like we can feed those channels and we can stay relevant by feeding them. So this is also a very important part to strategize while we are building the foundation and tapping into omnichannel.
Absolutely. If it's,
So
it
just
has
sort of
to-
going back to your question about channels, one thing we've observed more recently is a lot of folks have had success in programmatic, specifically with online video. That's been very effective, as well as audio, although audio tends to be a little more difficult to measure. I think there's a big promise with connected TV, but people have had mixed results. And the one thing I would suggest with connected TV is that when you do that channel, you work on planning, because that's extremely important. Plan where you're going to measure first versus making planning an afterthought, because we have many challenges with planning as an afterthought. So there's a lot of sort of nuances with how to actually measure duplication, low coverage of sample that you need to overcome. And, you know, again, important to plan and fail fast with some of these newer channels.
Great. I mean, I also think that you know, and I love the key themes that are coming out of this panel. It's almost like you guys talked about the answers before you came up here, right?
Just a little.
You know, I think years ago, and I think the evolution of programmatic is, you know, years ago, a lot of pharma companies were going to primarily endemic destinations like a Doximity or Sermo to buy that ad space and use that as a channel. You know, however, you know there's a price tag to that, especially as more competitors get on and layer on those ads alongside, right? But I think from a programmatic perspective, we are figuring out, and there's some great work being done on really leveraging programmatic to meet the patient or meet the HCP where they are, right? I think often we forget that HCPs, they listen to podcasts as well, right? Patients or HCPs, they could be on mommy blogs as well, right? So leveraging that programmatic universe is essential in your your multi-channel strategy. So Nataliya, you brought up something very interesting that I was gonna get to. AI, right? We've seen AI is a hot topic, hot button, right? I think I was talking to some of you about this prior to this panel. We were seeing AI used even in the R&D space, you know, developing medicines, right? Can you talk to me a little bit about where do you see AI going when it comes to do with reach, right? Reach of your messages and reach of your overall execution. Where do you see AI going, and where does it fit today if you're currently doing anything within that area?
That's a very interesting question. First of all, everyone tries to fill the space, so everyone tries from the vendor's perspective to do everything in this area, whatever we can, because this is the acceleration. This is what can help us to be more efficient, because whenever you use ChatGPT or any other model, you are trying to make more from your day, make additional couple of hours to spare your hands for some some important work. We are in the content production space, so immediately after the introduction of AI, we were like disrupted. We were feel like this space will be disrupted the first, because we will never ever spend such amount of money and time on content production anymore. This is where we need to totally like focus and think how we can change. So we started like with how we can work with the messages. So what can be used? So first of all, a lot of housekeeping, because we need to consolidate the data. We need to work because most of the challenges, the data sources are not consolidated properly. We need more transparency, more management around that area. Then we all have like brand tagging, marketing tagging, but there is also something different, which is image recognition, text recognition, and the others. So we need to do that indexing. We called it auto tagging, which must become the essential feature of every digital asset management tool. So then our content, once it is approved and data is consolidated, our model is using only approved data, like our customers' data, not the data from wild source of the internet. We can really reuse it to rebuild the messages, to give the new variety, to build the dynamic elements in every module, in the modular content. Then going into modular content space, we have a lot of things to do. We have to democratize of how we are doing templates today for every channel. That shouldn't be the priority of the one vendor or another. It must be really something which can be built internally based on the brand identity, on everything what was built before. And here we also will use AI. So then MLR. So today we can't substitute the human being, but we really can tap into the approvability level. So we developed a prototype of engine, which is after every agency is submitting some content, the approvability level of this content can be revealed. So based on the very simple things, whenever any violence in the imaging, any text, like it's recognizing, analyzing, and giving like the approvability level, also highlighting what was approved before. Then we can go to translating and many, many others, because this space of content creation will be more and more disrupted in the future with these technologies. But we need to be careful that I said in the beginning, we need to establish a framework around that. So we all understand the importance of digital asset management tool. While we are understanding so, we need to think about having protected sources, transparency, and visibility of what you use for your model, what you use, and how you protect the privacy around that. So this is the core. And then the tools like ours, a wizard can, or any other tool which is using the large language model within variety of the ways and approaches, can do the rest. So with the channels we all say about streaming channels, videos, with the AI-empowered avatars. That's totally a nice one. So if you will be interested, I can show you a demo, because you even can really build a human being which is responsible for a brand, and then give them a name, and it is artificial, but it is less artificial than a couple of months ago. And I hope, like with the time, it will be even more natural.
Yes.
Yeah, so a couple other thoughts on AI and programmatic. In particular, in creating audiences, one of the things we've been doing with our clients recently, which has been really, really productive, is being able to use AI, so machine learning models, not even to execute, to create an audience, which I know a lot of folks do, but using the patient journey, the physician characteristics and treatment patterns, as well as patient characteristics, demographics, buying patterns, to actually create models to tell you about what the drivers are for both the physicians and the consumers. And then being able to use those characteristics, not only in the creative, like you're talking about, but also in what should be the characteristics of the audience, and then what channels and what content are going to be most compelling for those patients. So that's the now. I would suggest in the future, one of the biggest challenges for AI is data. And you're saying, like, why is data a big deal? This is all about models. Well, it's data because, as you just talked about, a lot of this data needs to be patient privacy is really important. We can look at physicians and MPIs, but you can't always see the patient. So how do you integrate that patient with the consumer? And the key here is really identity resolution, in particular for patients, and being able to create a data set for yourselves that puts together essentially all of this information and then lets you create next best action orchestration, including programmatic advertising. So that's really sort of the future. And when you think of identity resolution, I know a lot of us right now might use one partner for identity resolution. I think in the future with first party, there's zero party, first party, multi-party, cross-channel, you're going to have to use multiple forms of identity resolution to really get the best sample of patients to feed into your future models.
Yeah, I would add that if you're doing some type of next best action, you're already using a form of AI, right? You're using some artificial intelligence to, behind the scenes, help you decide what that next best action could be from an orchestration perspective. To the next level, though, is how do you, as our colleague said, put the data in? We all have some type of prescribing data, diagnostic data, biomarker data, whatever that is, to help you get smarter in your next action, to feed AI in a machine that will help you think through, you know, a patient was just diagnosed. What does that mean when you say now to the physician, or how do you signal that to the representative? Beyond what we call like alerts through, you know, Viva systems. Like, how do you make us more intelligent, like your own personal Jarvis, is what I'll call it if you like Iron Man. I want my Jarvis. I'm looking for Jarvis, or whatever Jarvis came out to be Friday. But anywho, at the end of the day, I think it's a tool to help us start to leverage big data in a smarter way and be more personalized and customized and connected to customers on the back end, and actually help our sales forces as well. When you think of omnichannel, we are always talking about digital, but you know, they're a big piece of omnichannel, so we have to make sure that everybody is leveraging these tools in a specific way. I do believe from an audience perspective, though, I'll offer maybe a slightly different perspective on audience. So you can create microsegments. I haven't found AI to create those microsegments for you, so that human element of strategy has to be fed into the artificial intelligence so it can do what it needs to do. So I think segmentation and some business rules and everything on the front end are important to make yourself more successful on the back end with AI. From a future perspective, I would love for AI to, in content creation, say, this is going to be the content that helps drive adoption based on my learning. This is the content that will start trial. This is the content that will activate the office to do something or the patient to do something. So more machine learning, so you have less waste in your modular content, and you can really pick, like, here are my best bets, and help me from a strategy perspective do that faster.
This is where we are going,
Yes,
right? Because like first we need to do a lot of housekeeping, we need to do a lot of work, so like to make sure like we have illuminating all the hurdles, all the challenges we have today, and then that's a beautiful future. Then AI will suggest us where to use the content and for whom. So, but the first, what we need to do, we need to accelerate what we created with the modular content, with all this templatization, standardization. So we have to make sure like we do not have all this, you know, a lot of even more work than we had before, because like all of us are knowing when we start the modular content, so how much more we are invested than before, but that should be helped by AI immediately. Then we can step in the next.
I totally agree, and I think the other thing is you'll have more micro segments. So if you think about, I can really be more specific in my segmentation because I have this content library, and AI is helping me do this very well.
And then more opportunity for retargeting as well.
For retargeting,
right?
Yeah. And dynamic targeting, I would say. Yeah, dynamic targeting is important.
Very good. So we heard about a few different channels, leveraging different channels, and it was great to hear your different perspectives on how you will leverage AI and even from a measurement perspective, which I don't think I've heard before. But we spoke about audio, right? We spoke about CTV, right? We spoke about programmatic. We spoke a little bit about search, right? When we talk about these different channels, we're also talking about awareness, right? Driving that, leveraging these channels to increase awareness. Can you talk a little bit about measurement? Like, what's the measure of success? Like, how do you approach your measurements when it comes to do with your multi-channel tactics? But most importantly, how do you make sure that those results resonate with leadership as well?
So measurement, in our experience, has been, I think we've been doing measurement a very similar way across the board for many years. So if you're doing, let's say, an awareness campaign, one thing you're going to want to look at is, are you increasing, like in a test group compared to an A/B testing, test group versus a control group? Are the people in the test group becoming more aware? Are there more patients getting diagnosed with that particular condition, or going to the specialty of interest, right, or specialist of interest? But you really have to kind of think beyond that, and that's becoming really important, because if you consider the people that are becoming aware and they are going to their physician, you also need to think about who are those patients that you're not reaching, right? And are there reasons why you're not reaching them? And some of the key, just things that I think come to all of our minds is, one reason is DEI. Are there access issues? We just did a project where we found that the patients with the most severe disease were actually getting suboptimal therapy. And in analyzing the data, those people, the burden of disease on them, they had many comorbidities, and their share of wallet was very, very high. And so then it becomes really important to adjust your messaging so people understand efficacy of the product, and that access to the product is made, patients can get to that drug more affordably, or at least understand that condition and realize that, yeah, maybe they can get treated. So that's the second thing. And then the third piece of it is really thinking about the physician, right? And I'm not gonna say you're not gonna change physician behavior, but physician behavior can move very slowly. So you have to know who are your treaters, who are your loyalists, who are your dabblers, who are the people that, are splitters, and who are the people that never treat. And if you're gonna send a consumer or a patient that becomes aware to a physician that's never a treater, that could be an issue. So how do you also connect those treaters, using programmatic or other channels, advocacy, social media? How do you connect the treaters to the consumers that need the care? So
I think when you're setting up any campaign, I think at the foundation you're setting up your KPIs and your measurement system and any test and learns you want to do. I would agree that programmatic is driving awareness, but I think to me that's the base. And when you work with third parties or the right partnerships, which is key, you can take programmatic and change the equation. And what I mean by that is you may want to drive some type of engagement on the back end, what I call beyond the click. So you're not necessarily using programmatic for the impressions, but you're getting that to extend your reach, especially maybe to harder to find customers. And then where you take them in that destination is really the ultimate goal around that education. So sometimes the KPI is awareness, but sometimes it's time immersion, or what they're doing on the back end. How far did they get through your messaging? If you're pixeling or something else on the back end, as well as where did they go next to fuel that measurement system, and then understand what the impact is. Every channel has its strength programmatically, and so also partnering with your data scientists and analytics on the back end is important to inform the teams of how those channels together coordinate from an impact perspective. That also helps gain sponsorship throughout your organization. But to me, it's, if you flip the equation around how to use programmatic, you may come up with different measurement systems.
Great, and how do you, so when you think about, so you mentioned impact, Lori, right? Mm-hmm. So I have one question on top of that. When you think about impact, right, how do you translate impact that you're currently running and executing regularly, that you're very, very close to? How do you kind of button that up with a bow and deliver that to leadership so that they clearly understand that there is impact driven from all the different multi-channel activities that you're driving?
So talk to leadership often, gain their sponsorship. Talk to them not just about the impact, but also leading and lagging indicators. So for us, impact is going to be more of a lagging indicator. So looking at that and changing impact into impact to total sales, impact to impactable revenue, and then dollarizing it. I don't know what else to say. When you put the money on the table, and it's really good to see how that impact is driving the business. So I think I started earlier. I've been with Merck 30 plus years, and so most of our leaders have grown up in a field-facing only world, and that is they understand how the field drives impact. And so as we were standing up digital, one of the things that you have to translate is, how is digital going to be seen as the field? I understand the field. I need to translate digital so that they understand that impact. And you have to do it consistent, frequently, however many times you do your measurement, but also from a lagging indicator, but from a leading indicator, you have to make that bridge as to why certain digital metrics matter. No one's ever asked the value of a sales call. Well, maybe a little bit today, but no one's really asked. Like they want to know how many calls the sales teams make, right? Because they know that has value. You want to know how many engagements you're getting and how and the quality. And once you make that real, then you have sponsorship and buy-in along the way. And the last thing I will say is, even though you can measure digital in isolation, stack it up against what's the field driving impactable revenue? What is digital driving? What is consumer driving? And then when you put that all together, it can be a powerful story.
I would also add, we have to break these silos also among the executors. Mm-hmm. We are as the agency not always receive the information which is needed to make the impact of what we are doing. And I believe in the multi-vendor environment and with the teams, so there are a lot of silos which within the understanding of the valuable insight of one group, this is not necessarily, this is the very same understanding with the other, and then even with the best insights and the data, the impact will be lost because it's simply the execution will be dragging behind it. So that's something very important to highlight from my point.
Yeah, and I think we all know we leverage our audience quality and our front-end metrics to make our optimizations throughout the course of the year. And then whatever data we have is the best at whatever we can do with it, right? So you have your marketing mix models, you understand where your next dollar spent will get you the next best revenue. And I think that's the most of and it's a matter of how you combine all those different data sets to then tell the story to leadership.
Yeah. I want to add one thing to what you just said about measurement. I think it's really important to measure frequently to get an idea of where your campaign's going. On the other end of the spectrum, I was just reminded by Chad, who is our Chief Revenue Officer, that we always need to be more patient than we are sometimes in actually seeing the impact of a campaign. It's one thing to see clicks and impressions, and that's a great leading indicator. But then, over time, maybe 3 to 6 months, you're going to start seeing increased office visits, if you link it to your longitudinal patient data. And then ultimately, you're going to see brand scripts increase. But early on, you may even see the competitors increase because, sometimes people aren't as aware of your product and your product doesn't have as much market share yet to where the DTC is having an impact. So the doctor growth of that doctor prescribing has to follow along with the consumer advertising. So I guess my one thought on impact is look at it frequently, but be patient and know that it can take 6 months to a year to, maybe even more than that for patients to get diagnosed and treated. I know, for example, one of the markets you're in, multiple sclerosis. We've done a lot of work in that market, and it takes 10 years just to get diagnosed, and finally treated, and then, God forbid, moved on to your next therapy. So I would just say patience is key here.
I think you make a really good point, because especially if you're turning on new channels programmatically, you may not see the return or the value. You may not even get a heartbeat. So really partner with your data science team, as well as trying to establish what those goals are, because it could take a year or 6 months, even on the HCP side, to kind of see that, or even longer. The other thing is, once you get a baseline, I think the techniques that you use to help grow and scale that channel become really important. So making sure that you can test it, scale it, and then continue to drive that impact in channel, and then optimize.
Before we complete the topic, Lori mentioned this connectivity between the in-field data and digital, and this is a very important thing to mention still in this very conversation, empowering the rep. So if we also will make him privileged with all the information we get, so you can maximize the impact from the most emotional and empathetic channel we still have from the human being. So I think it's still important to mention here.
Absolutely, thank you.
Great. A lot of great insights. I hope that camera is on and recording everything here, so we get that good playback. So look, I know our time is running out, unfortunately. I could sit here all day with you guys, but we spoke about. I just want to cover some of the themes that came out of this conversation today. If that's okay with you guys, right? Number one, we spoke about the use of programmatic within your multi-channel strategy, right? Your omni-channel strategy. We spoke about measuring. We spoke about new innovative channels like AI and how you would measure that. We spoke about reporting to leadership and making sure that you are articulating efficacy and impact, right? And then we spoke about, content, right, as well, how AI could be used for content creation, module content, right? So I have one last question and I think we have time for some Q&A. What's keeping you up at night?
I would say from a modular content perspective, it's to everything that you were saying of getting our legal and regulatory folks on board with this and with the AI, and how we can get that into market to be able to have that personalized one-on-one messaging, and how do we overcome the barriers that sometimes are self-imposed.
I would say we need to really have this ability to experiment and do not just be scared about some pilots, MVPs, proof of concepts, because today, modern technologies, they open for us a lot of in the new world. So, and this doesn't mean to be perfect from the very beginning. So that's why the fear of experiment and going forward keeps us all behind the bigger time than anything else. Unconsolidated data, untagged content, no templates, no content at all. This is everything what we can do. But if we fail to experiment, to go to something new, that will drag us behind for a while. So let's be not scared about that.
So what keeps me up at night is really thinking about what you were saying, privacy, and making sure that data can be democratized, meaning that data is not kept in little tiny silos, but that we can integrate it all together to do better programmatic advertising and just better advertising and promotion, more compelling promotion overall.
I'm going to say a lot keeps me up at night, so it's going to be hard to figure out which one it is. In the therapeutic area that I am, it is scaling so fast And so keeping up with the scale and making sure that you're relevant and providing the best customer experience as an output of your channel and media strategy and omni-channel strategy is really important. So going beyond what I'll call vanity metrics and saying, are we creating that right experience and how do we do it in more real-time areas. The other thing is technology has just exploded. Obviously, we keep talking about AI, but will we be able to adapt fast enough to leverage it and stay ahead of the game and bring our more traditional colleagues? They're just trying to figure out omni-channel. Now you have ChatGPT and everything else out there. It's like, I'm just trying to figure out, they're like, well, why do you need to go to that platform? Well, physicians are really there. So bringing them along even faster and bringing more digital native thinking in our fabric keeps me up a little bit at night so that we can move faster because the market's moving. With or without us, it's going to move. So we got to move with it and be the first mover.
Very good, very good. But guess what? I have you all beat. My 18-month-old keeps me up at night. I'm not getting any sleep whatsoever. Great. So do we want to open up for Q&A or?
That's great.